Sometimes you never really know how you're going to react until the situation actually happens. I always read where everyone seems to have the answers, but yet they are on opposite sides of the subject. I grew up in a broken home. Mom and Dad argued all the time, and one day Dad walked out on us. I was 9 at the time and I really didn't understand it all. I had an older brother and sister, but they were now out of the house. He was 21 and she was 19, and they were both in college at the time. They are both now married and live in other states. I might only see them during a holiday or if they visit while on vacation. They're not very close to Mom since she got remarried. As best as I can understand it, I was what you call a love child. I was born when my parents were hoping to save their marriage at the time. I guess it went all right for a while, but their bickering and arguing started all over again. I think the straw that broke the camel's back was Dad found out Mom had cheated on him. She said it was because he cheated on her first, years ago. This crap went on and on till Mom blurted out one time that I might not even be Dad's son. I know it was because it all was said in the heat of the argument, but Dad ended up having a DNA test done. He and Mom were both shocked when it came back that Dad was not my biological father. Dad started divorce proceedings the next day at 9 a.m. He was the only dad I ever knew. He worked all the time and we weren't all that close, but now there was no one. After the divorce I talked to him once in a while, but it wasn't the same anymore. When I asked Mom who my father was, she said she wasn't sure. She always thought it was Dad. Life was hard for me after that. As I grew up I later learned that Mom was somewhat of a party woman. She married young and had my brother and sister, both before she was 21. She started going out with some of the women she worked with. Dad traveled a lot since he was a truck driver. So I know they both constantly cheated on one another. After the divorce Mom didn't remarry until I was 18, but she did bring a number of men to the house. Usually it was when I was gone to my friends or at my grandparents' home. They never spent the night when I was home. I became a voyeur, watching my mother having sex with other men. She never caught me, but it went on for years. I never told anyone but kept it to myself. I know a lot of incest readers will wonder if I ever did anything with Mom. The truth is no, I never really wanted to. I always thought of it as wrong, but it didn't stop me from watching. She gave me, shall I say, a liberal education. That leads to when I got married. I was 22 at the time and met Maryanne. She was a secretary in the lumberyard where I worked. I asked her out and we became friends and then lovers very quickly. We were married within the year. She was always the flirty type, but I always thought it was just part of her personality. She seemed to be friends with everyone. She was 20 when I met her and said she was a virgin. To be honest, I never knew for sure then, but now I know the real story. Our life was what I would have called normal. We went to the movies, visited friends and relatives, ate out about half the time. Sometimes Maryanne would cook meals for us at home. It was usually macaroni and cheese or something else that was easy to make. Lots of heat and served dinners. I didn't mind, we both worked and I knew she wasn't much of a cook when we dated. When we went out with friends I always wondered about Maryanne having sex with other men. I know it was because of the way my mother was. I didn't want to think that way, but it was lodged into my mind. I never told Maryanne about my mother other than she dated. The last thing I would have told my wife was that I was a peeping Tom and watched my mother have sex with a number of men. Our sex life I would have considered normal. We had sex in a number of positions, and Maryanne liked when I gave her oral. She stopped doing it to me when I came in her mouth one day. I had drunk a little too much and couldn't hold back. She gagged and choked and said never again. She jerked me off, and even kissed my cock, but wouldn't suck it anymore. The reason we got married was because she got pregnant. When she told me I asked her to marry me. I felt it was the right thing to do. I liked her a lot and figured I could grow to love her. Her family hated me from the start. I guess it began because they blamed me for not using protection and getting their daughter pregnant. In their eyes Maryanne could do no wrong. I was fighting an uphill battle from the start. The only one in her family that liked me was her sister Kathy. She was 2 years younger than Maryanne. She was a lot more quiet and kept to herself where Maryanne was outgoing. I guess I always had a thing for Kathy because she was the only one in the family that talked to me. In her 5th month of pregnancy Maryanne lost a baby. That was 2 years ago. We've been married for almost 3 years now. I've asked her if she has ever been with another man, and she always tells me she hasn't. During our lovemaking I've asked her if she ever thought about it, and she told me she doesn't need another man. I was more than enough for her. I was young and stupid and really didn't know much about life. When I graduated, my mom's new husband told me it was time for me to be out on my own. I found a cheap apartment, found a job at the lumberyard, and had a pretty good life going. I dated a few girls because, like most young men, I was a pussy hound. Maryanne went to a junior college in our town, and after graduating started working as a secretary at our lumberyard. Needless to say, young, good-looking women was always a nice sight. We dated, and by the third date began having sex. She was born and raised in Steubenville, Ohio, which was about 40 miles away. She would go home some weekends to see her family. When they met me, they really didn't care for me. I later found out that Maryanne used to date a guy named Rob, whom her parents loved. I guess he was a football star when they were in high school. Maryanne broke up with him when she was going away to college. He got a job in the steel mill where his dad worked. I guess they made pretty good money, and since Rob's dad was in management, he could be on a fast track to a promotion. I later learned from Kathy that Rob got pissed and quickly married one of Maryanne's friends, Sheila. They now have 2 kids of their own. Sheila and Maryanne don't get along anymore. That's why Maryanne stayed in our town after her graduation. She roomed with an aunt till we got married. I don't know her aunt all that well. We got married at the courthouse. Her parents didn't even attend. Her sister Kathy did show up as well as her aunt. Since the loss of the baby, Maryanne and her parents have made up. I rarely visited them but enjoyed when Kathy comes to see us. I guess I shouldn't feel this way, but I do. Maryanne had made a lot of friends in our town. Some are people we work with and others are our neighbors. I know she has gone out with her friends, but they are all married, and to the best of my knowledge she hasn't been unfaithful. She has told me that she has danced with other men if the girls went to a lounge, but that was all she ever did. A few times she had come home pretty horny, and the sex was great, especially if she had too much to drink. I honestly believed she was faithful to me. That was until we went out of town to her cousin's wedding. It was only 40 miles away in Steubenville, the city where she grew up and graduated from high school. She introduced me to so many people that it was almost like a high school reunion as well as a wedding. We both drank quite a bit, seeing we were staying in the motel where the reception was being held. I told her I wouldn't stay at her parents' house. They hardly even talked to me at the wedding. The trouble started when a lot of her old friends wanted to dance with her. I couldn't say much since her female cousins and friends asked me to dance as well. I held them close but didn't get inappropriate with any of them. I couldn't say the same about Maryanne. She was outright flirting, which she does when she drinks. Her cousins said she was always like that but was harmless. I did enjoy dancing with Kathy. She was just one of those people I enjoyed being around. I made sure I didn't do anything inappropriate with her, but did like holding her in my arms. I did tell her I didn't approve of the way Maryanne was acting. She didn't say anything about it, but I don't think she cared for the way Maryanne was acting either. I told Maryanne when I danced a slow dance with her that I didn't approve of what she was doing, and she just called me an old party pooper and said she would dance with who she wanted and the way she wanted. After that I wasn't doing much dancing, but a lot of drinking and watching Maryanne being groped over and over again. She would rub her ass against a guy and then looked at me and laugh. I never laughed back. There were basically 3 guys that she was dancing the most with inappropriately. 2 were old high school friends, and the other was just a friend of theirs. I've never seen her quite this wild before. I went up to her again and told her to cut this shit out or we would be leaving. She told me she was having fun and if I wanted to leave then just leave. She wasn't going anywhere. I went over by the back wall, kind of out of the way, and watched her. I was getting more and more pissed. It was getting late and some of the partygoers were starting to leave. I figured it was finally over and I could get over it. I went to the restroom and took a needed piss. When I came back out, Maryanne was gone. I looked all over for her and even asked a couple of her cousins if they had seen her. I saw 2 of the guys that were with her earlier. One was her old schoolmate. They said Rob took her up to her room. She was drunk and quite out of it. They laughed, but I didn't think it was funny as I headed up to her room. When I walked in, she wasn't there. I was worried that he had taken her to his room instead. I had no idea which one it might have been. Our room was on the 3rd floor. I went down to the front desk and asked what room her friends were in. I found out they were on the 1st floor facing the pool. So they had 2 door entrances. I walked down the hall and saw the 2 guys I had talked to getting ready to enter the room. They must have all been rooming together. They looked back at me and laughed as they entered the room. I went down the hall and heard a woman's voice. I knew it was Maryanne. I banged on the door and one of the guys opened it. I could immediately see Maryanne on her knees, lying across the bed with her ass in the air. This Rob guy had his cock buried in her. What the fuck? I yelled. Maryanne was so into being fucked I don't think she even heard me. This guy Tony told me that she came in willingly and I could either watch or leave. He reminded me that there was 3 of them and only one of me, and if I caused any trouble I would be getting my ass kicked. Tony also had a knife. He was right. One-on-one I could hold my own with any one of them, but 3 together I didn't stand a chance. I heard Maryanne ask Rob who came into the room. He told her it was Tony and Ben. My god Rob, they can see my pussy. He laughed and said, they're going to do more than just see you. Ben has wanted you for years and I told him and Tony that they could have a taste of your pussy. After all you've been rubbing your ass and teasing them all night. Maryanne didn't say anything as Ben helped Rob take off the rest of her clothes and turned her over. Tony stood next to me to make sure I didn't cause any trouble. He held a knife to my throat. I stayed there and sat on a chair out of the way as one after the other they fucked her, and she was begging them for more. I honestly don't know why I didn't at least try to put a stop to this, knife or no knife. I guess it was because of my past voyeurism or because Maryanne was asking to be fucked. When Tony realized I wasn't going to put up a fight he joined the others. I sat there like the wimp I was. Tony had just finished fucking her and came hard in her. Damn. She's one good white piece of ass, said Tony. I didn't mention it before, but Tony was a light-skinned black man. I would guess he was of mixed race. Maryanne sat up and that's when she saw me for the first time. Oh my god. Jim, what are you doing here? She yelled out. Watching a lying whore of a wife getting fucked. Don't go telling me you were being forced. I heard you asking for more. I yelled at her. I'm sorry, Jim. I had too much to drink. Tony, Ben, please let me up. This was a big mistake. I need to go talk with my husband. She must have sobered up a little. I have to tell you that when I used to watch my mother having sex, it was somewhat of a turn on, but watching my wife fucking other men made me want to puke. I didn't even have the start of a hard-on. No way you're going anywhere, sweetie, till we're through with you, replied Ben. No, look, you have to let me go. My marriage depends on it, said Maryanne. Your marriage is over, I said to Maryanne. I looked over at the guys and told them Maryanne gives great head and likes it when you come in her mouth. I knew she hated it. I stood up as Rob put his cock in Maryanne's pussy, and one of the other guys grabbed her tits. They looked back at me and laughed and called me a weak cuckold asshole. I shook my head and walked out the door. They were right. I went up to my room and packed my things. I knew my marriage to Maryanne was over. My problem now was I was made a cuckold, and these fuckers made me one. I knew deep down that I had to get even with them at any cost. I couldn't go through life letting these assholes do this to me. I knew one at a time I could take them. I just had to bide my time and do my best not to get caught. I packed my luggage, and even though I had drunk a lot I headed for home. I figured when they got through with Maryanne she would go up to her room and sleep it off. She had enough friends and relatives that lived nearby that she would find a way home. At 10 the next morning the phone rang. It was Maryanne. Jim, how could you just leave me there? I can't believe any man would leave his wife like that. How am I supposed to get home? Ask one of your boyfriends. Offer them a blowjob or a fuck for a ride home. Oh, they already got that, didn't they? Jim, I'm sorry. It was a mistake, I drank too much. I didn't mean for that to happen. They took advantage of me when you left the party. They were going to walk me to my room but took me to theirs instead. First, I didn't leave the party. I went to the restroom, and when I returned you had left with your old boyfriend. It took me a while to find out where you were. As far as them taking advantage of you, I'll come and get you if you file rape charges against them. Have them arrested, otherwise I'll have to say you were totally willing and our marriage is over. I knew our marriage was over anyway, but I wanted to see what Maryanne would say. I can't file charges against them. Everyone will know I was raped. Yeah, right. You were totally willing and now have remorse. By the way, I'm filing for divorce tomorrow on the grounds of adultery. Everybody will know anyway. You can have the apartment. Me and a couple of my friends are moving out my stuff. Have a good life. I hung up. She did get home that evening. Her sister Kathy drove her home. I got a storage locker for most of my stuff and got a room that rents by the week. I didn't need much. I went into the lumberyard on Monday and quit my job. Maryanne didn't show up for work that day. I'm not sure why, but it made it a lot easier for me. I told my boss I was moving out of state and gave him a local post office box number to send my final checks and my savings plan that I cashed in. I had my pickup truck that was paid for and went to the bank and took half of the money out of our savings account. I had our checkbook and paid off the balance of our credit card, at least the one that had my name on it. I was pretty much out of any debt that I helped incur. I left the checkbook at the bank and told them to give it to Maryanne when she came in. For the next few days I tried to formulate some kind of plan. After receiving my money I had $2,000 for my part of our savings and checking. I would be getting $15,000 in a week from my job savings, and another $2,000 from my last paycheck and vacation pay. I did contact a lawyer and filed for a divorce. He told me I needed names and proof if I were going to use adultery for divorce. My other option was a dissolution, but I wanted everyone to know the whore that Maryanne was. The lawyer went ahead and sent Maryanne the papers. He mentioned to her that I didn't want to speak to her and if she had any questions to contact him. I did buy a cell phone and gave my mom the number as well as the lawyer. I knew that there was a lumberyard in West Virginia, just across the Ohio border. I had met the owner a few times when he came to a few lumber company meetings. He told me if I ever wanted a job to look him up. I never thought I would be taking him up on it. I had a meeting with him and said I needed a job and explained that I was getting a divorce and that my wife worked for my old company. He promised not to tell my ex-employer that I was working for him and I could start the following Monday. I found myself a trailer for sale pretty cheap. It was set up in a trailer park. I picked up my stuff out of storage and moved in. Luckily it had a lot of furniture in it, so I didn't have to go buy a lot of things. I stopped by a Bob Evans restaurant outside of Steubenville and couldn't believe my waitress was Kathy, my soon-to-be ex-sister-in-law. She looked mad when she saw me. "Why did you leave Maryanne?" She said you were mad because she danced with her old boyfriends and left her at the wedding. Then when she went to your room you had left her stranded with no way to get home. I took her home the next morning and you had moved out. How could you do such a thing? I never thought you were like that, she said. Most of what you said isn't true. I don't have time to explain the whole story. If you want to know the truth, give me a call and we can meet and I'll tell you the truth. Your sister is a lying, cheating slut. I know Kathy was surprised when I called her sister a cheating slut. I never talk that way around Kathy. I gave her my phone number and asked one favor of her, and that was to not give that phone number to Maryanne. For some reason I felt I could trust Kathy. I ate breakfast and headed over to my new job. The only people that knew where I was working was Kathy and my lawyer. It was funny that I was only 15 miles from Maryanne's hometown of Steubenville. I was surprised that I did get a call from Kathy the following day. She worked mornings at the restaurant and went to college in the afternoon. She was taking courses in nursing and was just about finished. She had about a half year to go. She agreed to meet me for dinner at a restaurant in West Virginia after she got out of classes. She told me she wanted the truth and didn't feel she was getting it from Maryanne. Needless to say, Maryanne had everyone else convinced it was my jealousy that broke up our marriage. My job at the lumberyard was hard work, but kept me physically fit. I got all the exercise I needed. Some days I went out and had a few beers with some of my fellow workers. I would usually get something to eat and then to bed to get some rest. I kept in touch with my lawyer, and he told me he needed the names and addresses of the men who had sex with Maryanne. All I knew was their first names, Ben, Tony and Rob. I hoped that Kathy might help me out. When we met for dinner she wasn't in the best mood. She heard from Maryanne that I was trying to divorce her on the grounds of adultery, and Maryanne said they were unfounded. We ordered dinner and I told Kathy that I would be totally honest with her. I had no reason to lie. As we were eating I told her about the way that Maryanne acted at the wedding. She did say she thought that Maryanne was overdoing the flirting, and Maryanne admitted to it. Then I told her the rest of the story. I mentioned that I went to the restroom and when I came out Maryanne was gone, and so was her friend Rob. I let her know that I talked to Tony and Ben, and they said that Rob took Maryanne up to her room, but when I got there she wasn't there. I went into detail about finding her in Rob's room with his friends. How she was having sex with them and didn't even know I was there. How could you just sit there and watch them having sex with Maryanne? I can't believe you just sat there and did nothing. I guess I just froze when I first saw her. Then she was begging them to continue. Tony had a knife and he did tell me it was 3 against 1. I would have probably fought them anyway if Maryanne was being raped, but the sex with these 3 assholes was consensual. When Maryanne turned around and saw me she asked them to stop. She told me she made a mistake. I called her a slut wife, and that I would be getting a divorce. I went back to her room, got my things and went home. I was gone when you dropped her off at home the next day. I swear to God it's the absolute truth. I would never lie to you. I care for you too much. I even mentioned to Maryanne that if she filed rape charges against them that I would come pick her up at the motel. She told me she couldn't do that. Kathy stared at me for what seemed like the longest time. I believed that she could see the truth in my eyes. That's when I asked her for a favor. Kathy, I need the last names and addresses of Rob, Tony and Ben. Would you be able to get them for me? She looked at me, and then away for a few seconds. What do you want with them? She asked. I need them in my divorce statement. I'm getting the divorce on grounds of adultery. My lawyer told me that I need that information. Can you get it for me? Do you know what you're asking? Maryanne is my sister and you want me to betray her and side with you. No, that's not true. All I'm asking for is the full names and addresses of the men who had sex with my wife. You can't betray her if she didn't do anything wrong, can you? I know you well enough that you know I'm telling the truth. Kathy, I can still find out the information if you don't want to help me. It would just be faster since I know you already know their names. I guess more than anything I want us to stay friends. Okay, I'll get you what you want. I have to tell you that I don't know if I totally believe you. Stop on Thursday, that's when I work again and I'll have it for you. Thursday before work I stopped in the restaurant and asked to be seated in Kathy's section. I thought I saw her smile when she looked my way. When she came to my table she slipped me a folded piece of paper, and I put it in my pocket. I thanked her and ordered breakfast. I saw my lawyer after work and gave him a copy of the information I picked up. He told me that Maryanne had called him and said she wasn't going to sign the papers if it said divorce because of adultery. However, if we had a dissolution due to irreconcilable differences, she would agree to that. It had something to do with ruining her reputation. My lawyer told me that was my best option. The problem was that there was no proof to the allegation I was charging her with in the divorce. I didn't have any other witnesses other than myself, and the three men surely wouldn't admit to having sex with Maryanne. No video, no pictures, nothing to prove it happened. It was just my word against hers. I went along with the lawyer and applied for a dissolution. He said it would be finalized in about 4 months. I then got more bad news. Since I was on the lease and it would have to be renewed again in 2 months, I would have to pay half the rent for the next 2 months, then I could be removed from the rental agreement after that. At least I would rid myself of the lying bitch. The only problem was my need for some type of revenge. I was made a cuckold and sat there and took it. Looking back I should have just walked out instead of watching Maryanne and listening to her telling them how good it felt. Now I also remember Rob asking her if it was as good as it used to be. I remembered feeling sad when she said yes. Now, Maryanne gets away with being the one that people believed. I'm just considered a jealous husband. My lawyer and Kathy are the only two I told the whole truth to. I figured it would all come out in the divorce, but now it was just a dissolution. I did tell my friends and the guys that I work with that my wife cheated on me, but didn't give any details. It was bad enough that I was a cuckold, let alone that I stayed and watched it happen. In the following months I worked and would stop and see Kathy at the restaurant every chance I got. She gave me her work schedule and I ate there as she was working. It was an extra 15 miles to drive, but I didn't care. I asked her out and she told me she would love to go out with me, but not until after the divorce. No one in her family knew that we were seeing each other, even though it was only at her work. One day she looked sad when I came in. When I asked her what was wrong she told me that Maryanne was dating Rob again. It's only been 2 months since the two of you separated and she's already back with him. I thought Rob was married. He is. I went to see her one day and he was at your old apartment. When she came to the door I could see what they had been doing. All she had on was a robe and her hair was a mess. He was buttoning his shirt coming out of the bedroom. I didn't even go in after seeing them. I called her a slut and told her that she didn't deserve you. All she said was don't tell mom and dad. I left knowing that everything you told me was probably true. I'm sorry for doubting you. It had now been over 3.5 months since I applied for the divorce. I got a call from Kathy telling me she needed to see me. We met after she got out of class one evening. I was just happy to see her. We met in a lounge outside of the city. We sat in a booth and ordered a drink. Okay, what's up? I asked. You seemed very nervous on the phone. Maryanne's pregnant. I heard her tell mom last night. She told Mom that you're the father. That's bullshit. We haven't been together for over 5 months. How far along is she? She told Mom around 3.5 months. It must have happened about the time you left her. Are you sure it can't possibly be yours? I'm positive, but it's going to mess up my dissolution. Damn that bitch. I'm sorry, I know she's your sister, but I hate her for what she has done. All I can say is I married the wrong sister. What? Asked Kathy. If Maryanne hadn't gotten pregnant, I would not have married her. You see, I had a crush on you, but I wanted to do what was right by Maryanne, and we got married. I know now that she never loved me, but I put in a real effort. Now I have to wonder if the first baby was even mine to begin with, knowing she was sleeping around. Kathy didn't say anything. I think she was a bit shocked. Then she said, "Why didn't you ever say anything to me?" asked Kathy. What good would it have done? I thought it best to just hold it in. Besides, I didn't know how you felt and nothing would have changed, but everything would have been very uncomfortable for both of us. I wanted to make my marriage work, but I guess your sister had other ideas. I'm sorry, I really am. I liked you too and thought of how lucky Maryanne was. Jim, I have to leave now. Please don't let anyone know I told you about Maryanne. I just thought you should know. I'm sure she'll bring it up in a couple weeks at your dissolution hearing. I can't see you before that except if you come into the restaurant. She got up to leave and gave me a hug. I saw tears in her eyes. She gave me a piece of paper, which was her work schedule for the next month. Maybe she wanted to see me after all. I knew it must be hard on her knowing how Maryanne was lying to her parents, or that she hadn't told anyone that she and I had been in communication. I did stop by for breakfast whenever I knew she was there. We only had a few minutes to talk, but it was always nice seeing her. I did get a call from my lawyer about our appearance in court. He mentioned that my wife said she was pregnant and was asking for support. She was at the closing of the dissolution with her attorney. I told them we had agreed to our settlement and it was already done. I wasn't paying anything more. I did tell her attorney that the baby wasn't mine, and I wasn't giving her anything. Maryanne had health coverage from her job, so it would cover most of the costs of the baby. I knew the baby wasn't mine, so I came up with an idea. I told her attorney I would sign an addendum to the dissolution form, that if the child was mine, that I would pay half of any medical bills that would occur as well as child support, till the child was 18. She looked at me with one of those, "How do you know that?" looks. I just walked out a free man, but in my gut I knew that really wasn't much revenge. I still needed it, real revenge. Now it was time to make a few plans. I often thought that maybe I should just let it all go and go on with my life, but my inner feeling wouldn't let that happen. It constantly nudged at my insides. The next time I saw Kathy, I mentioned that I told Maryanne that I knew she was sleeping with Rob, and she might want to tell him he's going to be a father. God, Jim. You didn't tell her I told you, did you? No, I just blurted it out. No one except the guys at work know I even come here to see you. I am divorced now, so can we get together? Jim, this is a very busy time for me. I'm working, plus I have my school and finals coming up. I'm graduating with a nursing degree in a few months. Then there is the big problem of dealing with my family. They still blame you for the divorce and getting Maryanne pregnant again. Maybe if I talked with them they might understand differently. Someday maybe, but this isn't the best time. I'm not avoiding you, in fact I want to be with you, but the time has to be right. Please try and understand. Due to her work schedule and schooling, I could only see her twice a week for breakfast. I told her I could wait as long as she needed me to. I was able to get a little information on the scumbags that had sex with Maryanne. I decided to start getting even. I knew that the three assholes didn't always hang out together. Once in a while they went to a bar across from the steel mill after work. I had their home addresses thanks to Kathy. She had no idea I was going to use it for revenge. I decided to start with Tony. He would be the one least expecting it. This is the end of the part 1. Thanks for this story to the user DG here. If you want to listen to the part 2, drop a like, so that's how I will understand this story was really interesting for you. Cheers.